Hey guys, I decided I'm gonna stand up because I don't like sitting. So you can see a little bit of a different background. Obviously, here's all my guinea pig and rabbit food. We do have a little bit of a zoo here. I like animals, so we just added another cat to the mix today. So we have three cats, two guinea pigs, and a bunny. Yeah. So, anyway, that's what that is. And I'm sure some of you have seen it and like, what's in the background? It's guinea pig food and cat food, rabbit food. So, wanted to talk to you today about control. This is fifth episode coming to you. I saw a lot of people are starting to watch, so definitely subscribe if you like it. I have a goal, which is to have 100 subscribers, because that means I can have a customized URL. YouTube requires 100 subscribers for a customized URL. Right now, it's just some oddly long thing, and I don't want that to be the case for a very long time. So I'm hoping we can hit that 100 subscribers, and then we can get a custom Seasons and Signs URL. So help me out with that if you like what you're seeing. Obviously, every week's a new topic. This week, we are talking about control. I don't love this topic. Last week, accountability, I'm pretty good at. This week, control, I am god awful at. I have a very difficult time not trying to control situations. And probably a lot of you are like that too. Now, those of you who don't struggle in this, congratulations. Give us all some advice, because when we try to control situations, when we try to control anything that isn't ourselves, it's just an illusion, right? We have this illusion of control. For me, I like to have the illusion. I like to trick myself into thinking I have any control over anything, which I don't, by writing lists, which on one hand keeps me accountable. I talked about that last week, but on the other hand, it's just a way that I can feel like I'm controlling my day or my environment, right? Or what I do or what I don't do. Other things might be I'm obsessively writing calendars down, planning things, trying to have everything sort of laid out. And I think COVID did a really nice job of showing us how little control we have over anything in our lives but ourselves. We don't have control over our job. We don't have control over our finances. We don't have control over our health. To a degree, we can control what we put in our body, what we expose ourselves to, if we exercise or not. We can control things. That's not to say that we have no control. It is to say that we have no control over anything but ourselves. And people have come to this realization more and more lately that the only thing you can control is you, right? And that's a really hard thing to do. It's really hard to control what you do, what you think, what you say, what you feel, who you are around, how long you're around them. Control of the self requires discipline. We'll talk about discipline later on. We always have so many topics to talk about later on. But control requires discipline. And control requires, control requires also accountability, always accountability, but sort of a hard line in the sand. I'm not going to do this thing, or I am going to do this thing, right? When we control ourselves, we are making sort of a declaration of what we will and won't allow, right? So today, for an example, we were out before, me and Tom, and he stopped at Popeyes. Now, your girl loves some fried chicken. I can't lie to you. Mashed potatoes, biscuits, fried. But your girl's also working to be healthy, fit, exercise every day, and have no, bad foods. So I said no. And he was like, well, you sure? And I'm like, no, I'm not sure. Of course I want this food. I literally, I'm not kidding, put my hands over my ears and put my face down while he ordered. And then when it came in the car, because you can smell it, it's Popeyes, right? I rolled the window down, stuck my face out the window. That was a huge temptation for me. Control comes when we say no to things we don't want to do, and we say yes to the things we do want to do. It's also how boundary setting happens, which we'll talk about later too. And the problem with control is that it takes separating from your feelings to have control over yourself. Again, remember, you don't have control. I don't. No one has control over anything but themselves. So we have control over our attitude. We have control over our thoughts. We have control over our feelings. We have control over so many things that we don't think we have control over, don't want to acknowledge we have control over. We have a lot of control over ourselves that we don't pay attention to, and we have no control over anyone or anything else, which we also don't pay attention to. A lot of times we're so focused. Again, I've talked a lot about distractions. This is going to be, in this first couple weeks, you're going to see the whole point of Seasons and Signs is to like look inward. And that is because I got myself into so much trouble by never looking inward. I'm talking like legitimate legal trouble, which at some point I'm going to really go into, not here, on a personal account probably. But I got myself into a lot of really bad trouble because I never focused on myself. I never focused on what I can control. I never focused on my attitude or my emotions. And I was just so busy trying to put out everybody else's fires. That does nothing for anyone. Not really. And we do this a lot as parents. We do this a lot as people. We're trying so busy to control all these elements around us. We don't pay attention to our own self, the own element that we have in front of us. I'm actually reading Home and Work by Christina Nippert-Eng. And she makes such a great point about this that I want to read verbatim because it's so, so good. And it goes a little something like this. The homework boundary is certainly a pervasive and, as I will show, quite a problematic issue for most members of our society. Why? Why do we have such a hard time controlling work and life? Again, as you know, I'm writing a dissertation about all this, and I had a problem with this, like in a big way, of letting those home and work boundaries cross over and sort of permeate each other in a way that they shouldn't have. But we don't control ourselves and where we want to assert ourselves in one way and assert ourselves in another way. What I mean is we don't control ourselves in where we want to assert ourselves in work and how we want to assert ourselves at home. Because we're like, oh, well, I have a lot of work to do. Now this is going to be a really big problem in COVID. I have a lot of work to do. I have time. Rather than like watching TV with my husband, I'm just going to do some work. Which again, I get, but when you do that every night, we have so many distractions that can keep us away from the important things. We do. We idolize and put money and our work and our position on this pedestal that we really need to kind of scale back, because that money, work, and position can be taken from us in like a second. COVID has really shown this. 2018 and 2019 in my life really showed me that. Like, it doesn't matter how hard you work for something. If they gave it to you, they can take it away from you. And what does that leave you with? It leaves you with yourself. And what can you control? Just yourself, just your attitude, just the way you think about things, and just the way you feel about things. And feelings are fickle. They really are. So, recapping. We cannot control anyone else. We cannot control any other situations. We can control ourselves. How? Great question. Such a great question. How do we control ourselves? On one hand, like I said, saying yes to what we want to say yes to, saying no to what we want to say no to. But really, we control ourselves by getting to know ourselves. Like, what do we like? What do we want? What do we project? For example, not Thomas, a different ex-boyfriend of mine, he was like, you're so selfish. You're like literally so selfish. And I was like, no, I'm not. But I thought about it, and I really was. Why? I would do anything for anyone at any time. How was I selfish? Why was I selfish? Because nobody got in the plan, no one got in the way of my plans. Like, my plans for myself were happening no matter what. Come hell or high water. And that leaves very little room for anybody else in relationship. And so what I was doing was trying to control my life trajectory so much that if people rejected me, it wouldn't even matter because I was on the straight and the narrow. Do you know what I mean? We like to control our own life path, I guess, sometimes. For me, I did anyway. So that nobody else really contributes to it or plays a part in it. And like I said, I'm a control freak. So I feel like I have everything in check. I feel like I'm perfect. I feel like I'm on the ball when I feel like I'm in control. A lot of us, I think, are like that. And so what ends up happening is if you're not in control, you feel very overwhelmed, very anxious, very uncertain. When you feel like you're not in control, you don't know how to act, perhaps. Or your reactions are negative, right? And so once you come to the place of being comfortable with not being in control, or at least acknowledging you're not in control and just trying to like talk yourself through it, it does make for a sort of nicer situation in your life. What I mean by that is when you start looking into yourself and you start being more aware of your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, your concerns, you start to realize what your triggers are. And by triggers, I mean anything that hits you in a negative way. So when you're feeling anxious, you're feeling short-tempered, you're feeling rushed, you're feeling angry. Anger is a secondary emotion, so there's always an underlying issue there. You're feeling anything. For me, anything that makes me feel anxious or not prepared or unaware or taken by surprise, anything I can't plan for, basically, puts me out of control. Anything that puts me out of control makes me feel like I'm not on my A game. Once you get into the place where you're, okay, I'm not in control, that's all right. I can't control what you do or what you think or what you feel, and I'm okay with that. I accept that. I can only control myself, right? Once you get to that place, things get a little easier. For example, when you're at work, let's say, someone doesn't like you, right? They talk about you, they make you really uncomfortable. Pay attention to those emotions, right? You feel uncomfortable, you feel rejected, you feel anxious, you don't want to work around them. Instead of us, so many of us are just like, okay, you don't like me, that's fine, I don't really get it, but I'm just gonna leave it, I accept it, and move on. Instead of doing that, so many of us try to puzzle out like why, what we can do, we let it infect us, we let it make us feel some type of way. You know, you can't control their reactions, you can't control how they feel about you. And we like to control that. When the media had a frenzy with my situation, all I want to do was scream like, I'm not like the way you're portraying me. Who cares? It doesn't matter. I was just like, okay, I'm going to accept that that stuff is what they said, and I know myself, and I'm going to move on. I can only control me. I can only control how I react. I can only control if I let it upset me or not, and I'm not going to. It's not worth my time. It's not worth my energy. When you get that level of control over yourself, which I don't have, I don't have it yet. I'm working toward it. It is a process. If you know Levi Lusko, he is a preacher, and he has, this week he's doing spiritual blindness or just blindness in general. And it's this idea that everybody's looking for like a pivotal moment where you go from dark to light or blind to sight. But there's degrees of it. Everything's on a spectrum. Everything's a process. Everything's a journey. So there's no moment when you're like, you got control, check, right? Like we're always moving to that self-actualization. We're always moving to being our best self. So we might have, it's not like a positive trajectory like this. It's like stocks, you know, it's moving upward trend, but it goes up and down as you go. So with any of this, control, accountability, choices, self-worth, anything that we're going to talk about, these are all places where people struggle, humans struggle, because they are human. They just do. They're just going to. And some weeks you're going to be like, oh, I really need that. And some weeks you're like, I don't need this, but someone else does. Maybe check yourself in those weeks. Like if you think you don't need it, just double check, because a lot of times we're so quick to point out like, oh yeah, he needs this, but like you're really the one who needs it. So just, you know, check yourself before you wreck yourself. But this idea of control is pivotal. It's one of these like foundational building blocks to self-actualization, which is where we're trying to go, right? Seasons, the point of seasons and signs, Seasons has to do with moving from like emotional childhood or immaturity or naivete through to emotional growth, maturation, and wisdom, right? That's this whole point of what the seasons is. We'll talk about signs when we get there. We're not there yet. And I mean, it's a process. It's a process I'm still going through. It's just, I had an accelerated kind of like fast learn, and I don't want that to happen to anybody. Because when you lose control over yourself, you can really lose control over yourself, which means that someone else has control over you. Someone else is your puppet master, and you don't realize who it is or who's pulling your strings. Because you just want to do, like when you're sitting around doing everything for everybody else, they control you. You don't control you. So it's really important, so important. I realized that the hard way. Like, I gave up so much of myself to my students, and I lost myself in the process. I completely lost control over my life, myself, my identity, my self-worth, everything, because I was so invested in my job. A lot of you are probably experiencing that with COVID. You give so much more to your job than you do to your family. And at the end of the day, if you lose your job, you still have your family. And you're like, well, I still have my family to take care of. That's true, but money can only do so much. You can always get more of it. Time is a very finite resource that we don't get more of. So I'm just, especially those of you who are workaholics, who like to control things, who find their worth in their work, take a beat, take a pause, because you need this message. Control yourself. Stop trying to control everyone else. And then you'll find, once that happens, you feel more liberated, you feel better at, it's a real like weird paradox in that the more you control yourself, the more free you feel. The more you let everyone else control you, the more you feel pressured by their expectations and what they are demanding of you, whether it's like a verbal demand or like just kind of a implied demand. It is up to you to set work-life boundaries. It is up to you to set relationship boundaries. Again, that's the whole point of my dissertation, is this idea that if you have certain qualities, you might be better at setting work-life boundaries. And not just work-life boundaries, any boundaries. The more self-aware we are, this is the research I'm trying to prove, the more self-aware we are, the better chance we have, we'll see if I can prove this or not, of setting balance in our lives. And we need balance. And balance and growth and maturity, emotional maturity, all start with these fundamental building blocks of self-worth, choice, accountability, control. Okay, so I implore you, for your own good, because I learned this lesson the hard way. It wasn't a fun lesson. I'm also a really like stubborn case, and I'm like pretty hard of study, but I learned this lesson the hard way. Just focus on controlling yourself, controlling your thoughts, controlling your actions, controlling your reactions. Oh my God, control your reactions. Because if you don't, you give whomever to that power over you. I tell Thomas all the time in traffic, I'm like, someone cuts him off. What are you getting mad about? Like, okay, he cut you off, he did the wrong thing, now you're gonna do the wrong thing too? Like, calm down, take a beat, right? And just relax. And we allow anybody else to like pull our trigger instead of like stepping back and just being like, all right, what am I really upset about, and why am I upset, and is it worth that time or that energy? Most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's really not. But it comes from knowing ourselves, knowing our triggers. I learned, it was like a big lesson for me on the driving thing. I learned that feeling rushed places really makes me anxious, and it really makes me not my best self. It makes me feel like I'm out of control. So what do? I make sure I leave myself enough time to not be rushed, you know? And I refuse to allow that time to kind of have that control over me. So I'll be like, if I see I'm gonna be late, I'm like, okay, you know what? You get there when you get there. Stop trying to be on time. You're making an issue where there doesn't need to be one. You were the one that left late. You were the one that did this. And by you, I mean me. I'm talking to myself here. When we take that accountability, this is why accountability was last week, because they're hand in hand. When you're accountable, you have more control. Do you see how that works? When you're blaming everybody else, which, again, some of us do more than others, but when you're blaming when anyone blames anybody else, the control goes to them, the accountability goes to them, and the growth doesn't come to you, and it doesn't go to them. It goes nowhere, because there's no growth, because you're not taking accountability and controlling yourself, which is why all of these are so important. All these topics are so important, because they can really help us just be better, more emotionally mature people. Okay, so talking about control, remember, control yourself, control your thoughts, control your reactions, control your emotions, get in touch with who you are and what bothers you. The more you know about that, the better you're going to function, because you want to control things when you feel like you're out of control. You feel out of control when things like trigger you, literally trigger you. And so if you know what triggers you, then you could stop feeling triggered, you could stop feeling out of control, and then you can start being in control, right? So find your triggers, control yourself, and make sure you subscribe to Seasons and Signs on YouTube if you like what we have coming here, because again, remember, 100 subscribers. Tell your friends, 100 subscribers. That's what we're trying to get to. And of course, last thing, if you go on the Patreon, Seasons and Signs has a Patreon site. If you really like what we're doing here, you can donate there and partner with us. If you like what we're doing, help us keep coming to you. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for stopping by, and remember, control yourself.